Hello, everybody. May I have your attention, please?
You tilt the mic towards you.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm William Morrison. I'm a first year here at Centenary College, and I'm an intern here at Meadows Museum of Art. I'm currently doing research on 6 of the museum's pieces, which date back to ancient Maya. Tonight, we have the pleasure of listening to The Good Social Life in Lesser Developed Countries. Our speaker, a professor at Centenary, is the chair of the Sociology Department. While visiting family in Ecuador this summer, he presented the results of his study that compares the cultures of Ecuador and the United States at the preeminent new university, Yache Technical Institute. His more recent work has accounted for the pattern through a theory of complexity and the emergence of structure across physical, biological, psychological, and sociological phenomena. I am pleased to present our speaker, Dr. Loren Demerath. But before I do, next Monday and Tuesday, there's going to be a photographer from New York named Jonathan Ouch, and he's going to be doing 3 workshops here at 6 o'clock Monday and Tuesday. But without further ado, our presenter, Dr. Loren Demerath.
Thank you, everybody. 1, 2. Thanks. It's great to be here. Y'all, thanks for coming out. Really appreciate it. It's an honor to speak to you tonight. I'm going to tell you about my research that I conducted a while ago, but it's applicable to this wonderful exhibit of photographs from Latin America. A lot of these buildings that look quaintly old and dilapidated have a meaning for interpreting Latin American culture, really, helping us to do so. So this is the title of my talk, The Good Social Life in Lesser Developed Countries, and that's who I am. I don't have to say where I'm from, do I, y'all? I don't have to put Centenary College on there. I could add to this, or I could take out, rather, the R. Is this still working? 1, 2. I could take out the R there to say lesser developed counties. I could do that, okay? Theoretically, I could do that. I'll get here in the light a little bit so y'all can see me. When I go through this model and sort of talk about the ideas that apply, that are coming out of this research, you might think, okay, this scheme of countries, how he's explaining this pattern across countries, could apply to any smaller level, or even a bigger level, I suppose, groups of countries and societies, to explain patterns there too, differences in social life there as well. So let me explain how I got started with this. I met my wife, who's from Latin America, who's from Ecuador, South America. And as I was contemplating the fact that I was going to become sort of part South American in a way, I started reading up on the cultures and so on, and thinking about, well, how could I maybe fold this into my research? And so I was looking over some just books on the shelf, really, in my office, some old books, and one was by this guy named Gert Hofstede, and he did a lot of research that I'm going to sort of tell you about, sort of set it up here. He interviewed IBM employees all over the country, all these different IBM employees, all over the world, excuse me. Not in the Soviet Union, places like that. This is happening in the 70s that he's doing this. And so 53 countries overall, and then he computed some measures. He found basic differences in collectivism, and individualism. Collectivism is the importance of helping friends and family so that at the end of the day, how fulfilled are you? And they would ask, at the end of your day, what are you proud about? What are you satisfied about that you've done? And what does it have to do with? And people would describe their achievements related to friends and family. Typically, well, I helped these people, I helped those people, I felt good because I was able to bring home more money for the family or do something like that, or I feel bad because I wasn't able to do those things. That's collectivism, and they found that it was more oftenly noted in certain countries than in others. In others, it was individualism, where you're seeing your day, the fulfillment of your day, whatever you're doing, based on how much you've done sort of for yourself. It's how independent I feel, how autonomous I feel, the freedom that I have. I was able to do these things for myself today, and I feel good about myself today. That's individualism. And they found that broke down across countries. That is, some countries tend to be more individualistic, some sort of in between, and some very collectivistic. I'll show you the rankings that Hofstadter came up with. The rank order of countries on individualism. There we are, number one. We're number one. You can see him breaking down there, that's right. And continuing there, we're starting to get our first South American countries there. Well, there's Argentina, which likes to think of itself as a European country, really. We're Italian, they like to think. And then I skipped some to get to the end here. You see more Latin American countries there. And there's Ecuador, just about at the bottom, second to last, in terms of individualism, which meant it's more collectivistic. So that got me to thinking that I could research that there's a contrast there. I could investigate how people experience that difference. There's something different. I mean, they're not saying Ecuador is just like the United States. So I could talk to people. I could maybe talk to people who speak English, because my Spanish isn't that good yet. So maybe I could talk to people who've lived in both the United States and Ecuador. So that's what I did. I interviewed Ecuadorians who lived in the United States, and United Statesians, they don't like to refer to them as Americans necessarily, but Americans who lived in Ecuador. And sort of in-depth interview was my technique. It's a fun way to do research in sociology. I mean, you just got a license to talk about whatever your project is about. You set the meetings. It can be over coffee, over a beer, what have you. A lot of these were formal interviews, but after a while, I incorporated any conversation that I had. So my father-in-law talking over the breakfast table, if he gets going, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm listening. I wouldn't tell him that I'm, taking notes right then, but that kind of stuff is fair game in this sort of research. I did 16 Ecuadorian folks that I interviewed, and 18 people from the United States, expatriates, evenly divided between men and women, all middle class. I'm trying to concentrate on that strata. There's reasons for that. Reasons I wanted to concentrate on that has to do with access to institutional resources and just holding that variable constant. I wanted to make that comparison. And about an hour and 15 minutes on average, the interviews lasted. Sometimes I got together with them again. The questions included what do you miss from your home country, what do you like about this culture, and I also wanted to focus on family. What do you notice about family that's different? So now I'll go over some of the differences. And what I'm going to show you are quotes from certain interviews that illustrate patterns that were throughout the interviews, that were commonly noted, that kind of thing, and this is a good exemplar. So I'm pulling out sort of good specimens that illustrate the pattern. So, differences typically noted in the interviews. Ecuadorians on family in the US. One person said, in the US, people don't spend as much time with their families. Family just isn't as important there. Like, some American friends don't even, or some friends, don't even go visit their parents for Christmas. And that was seen as just, you know, crazy. I mean, I could have exaggerated their tone of voice. Don't even visit their parents for Christmas. Not bad. I don't think you need family as much there. It's just, well, you're more on your own, aren't you? Speaking in the US, you can do a lot here, but you know, it's not the same. Like family, like respect for family. I don't really like The Simpsons, she said after a while. They don't respect the father. Really, it makes me angry. Speaking in the US, I like the independence here. I don't like how everyone is looking over your shoulder at home. Americans on family in Ecuador. They really get involved in each other's business. In the US, you'd think, I mean, you'd say that's nosy. But here, they don't even look at it like that. The constant contact would really get to me. I don't think I could take it. It's a big emphasis. This is a woman, by the way, an American woman. And so that's important to consider with gender roles. It's a big emphasis. The meals and visiting and everything, I wouldn't want it. No way. Or, well, I guess I'd have a maid. I don't know. So that's part of the middle class experience. You would have an empleada, an employee who's a woman often, and a maid who helps you with the cooking. She often does all the cooking and all the cleaning. If you're upper middle class, so that's what she's referring to. I love it. I really think it's something we miss out on in the US. We're just after our own thing there. We forget about family, how nice it can be. You know, you've got people looking out for you. Other differences typically noted. Ecuadorians on socializing. People don't just visit as much, just talking. Up again. Yes, there's a lot you can do there. There are more opportunities. You know, it's easier there. But you don't have this, smiling and gesturing between us. Okay, so what happened here was we were walking through town. Ibarra, Ecuador is my wife's hometown, and she's here tonight, and she can tell you about it afterwards. But we're walking through town. It's a city about the size of Shreveport, really. And walking through downtown, it's not uncommon for us to meet people that we know. It's a pedestrian city. You're running into people. You're not isolated in cars, and so you have that opportunity to run into people. And she ran into an old brother of a friend of hers, just sibling of a friend of hers, hadn't seen for a long time. And we ended up sitting down outside his cafe, and this is not the first time that had happened. We sit down someplace to talk. And it was the third time in these interviews that somebody made a reference, like a physical reference, referencing something physical when it isn't physical, to this. They just gesture to this. And they meant the ties between the individuals, the social relationships. So it was striking to me. I don't think we as Americans would do that. An American on ceremonies. Invitations are more important, like birthday parties. Like if a friend invites me to go to a birthday party for their kid, that's a big deal. It's real important that I go. Or a christening or something. In the United States, it's not such a big thing. So being there. And then the same American on truth versus being there. It's more important to tell the truth in the US. Here, there can be exceptions, especially if it's to spare someone's feelings. But here, it's more important to show you care about someone, making sure you invite them to a party, that kind of thing. Ecuadorians on order. Speaking in the US, people follow the rules. They obey the law here. I guess it's just, there's more order. That came up again and again. There's a lot of respect for the law here, like the way people drive. Speaking in Ecuador, here the corruption is terrible. I'm sorry, this actually, should have mislabeled this. This is an American, no, actually it's not. This isn't Ecuadorian, it's correct. Palanca is important. It probably shouldn't be, but it is. Palanca is the connections you have through your name, and so that people don't want to mess with you because of who you're connected to. But the reason I noted that is because I had an interview. At this point, I can say who this is. He's not there anymore, and, but he was the U.S. consulate for Ecuador. So he said, you can just refer to me as a high-ranking diplomat. Don't mention me by name. But he said Palanca was really bad there. The people's expectations to be served differently based on their class status. Okay, so I've got a couple little stories here about this. Waiting in line to get to buy something at like a department store or something like that. And I'm with my brother-in-law. Yeah, there's like 4 or 5 people in front of us, and somebody comes up. Yeah, they sort of cut, right? And he goes up and somebody and pays, and then they leave. And I say to my brother-in-law, I'm like, in the U.S., we'd say that person cut in line. We'd be angry at that. And of course I was. I'm like, you know. And he said, yeah, here in Ecuador we say, I wish I knew the cashier. That's accepted. Pulled over while driving. At one point, it was a long time ago, and the kind of thing may not happen anymore. So this could have been 20 years ago, but I don't think so. I think it would still happen. But I was pulled over for something, being a headlight or something like that, or just checking my ID and maybe finding out I didn't have the right stamp, and the cop indicating, well, it's going to take a lot of time. We're going to have to bring you in, and we're going to have to go down to the office, and I'm like, whoa, really? And I think my wife is sort of nudging me, and I said, well, would this help? I gave him $5 just to ease the convenience. Would that be okay? And he said, okay, yeah, that'd be all right. And so we got to go on. Another time, for our marriage license, we needed to get the marriage license like soon, because we were going to leave the country in a month and a half. But I mean, we needed to be able to leave the country in a month and a half. And the secretary said, well, we're not going to be able to get an appointment for you with the judge until, it looks pretty bad. And Janine was explaining later, my wife, that she wants a little something, so we'll give her a little something. And I wasn't disappointed at all, because I knew this would be part of the research. I was like, right, this is perfect. But that was another moment. Yeah. So here's sort of the question, the puzzle here. After you do a lot of these interviews and stuff as a sociologist, you find a pattern like that. You ask these sort of questions. How does this make sense? So what's the connection between order versus corruption on the one hand, and being there or socializing and this, right, on the other hand? Where's that coming from? Well, why is that? It's not that people are just deciding to be that way. Sure, you're socialized to be that way, but why are you being socialized to be that way? What's sort of the source of it? So one question to think about is, where is corruption more common? And what is it about the corruption? What is it about those circumstances, those countries, that makes there be more corruption? What's associated with it? What's correlated with corruption? All right, so I'm going to lay a graph on you here. This is from Transparency International, and they research corruption. Here's a bunch of countries plotted for more corruption on this end, less corruption on this end. And you can see what the x-axis is there. That's your per capita GDP. Okay, so that on the vertical axis is how much money per person you have. So how wealthy is the country? So the poorer the country, clearly, the more corruption is likely to be there. So we might think about why that might be. Another piece to the puzzle is here. This is old data, but it holds true. There's another guy, Ron Engelhardt, who's done a big bunch of data, which I'll refer to in a little bit. It backs up this basic relationship. Okay, there's collectivism up there, and individualism is down here. And here's wealth on this axis. So as you go out on this axis, you're getting wealthier, and you're also getting more individualistic, right? So, I think those things are related, and a lot of other sociologists do too, that sort of look at this kind of pattern. There's something about money which makes institutions more reliable, which makes you able to tend to yourself and trust those institutions more, and not have to rely on social relationships, kinship, that kind of thing. Now, by the way, this is where we go to counties, from countries to counties, perhaps. And here's this. I'm not going to counties, but this is states. This is how much you trust strangers by state. And it's by income inequality. So here's low income inequality. Here's high income inequality. And you're going down in trust. And it's people saying most people can be trusted, the percent that they agree with it. You may not be able to see but that's Alabama, West Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, Kentucky, Texas, Louisiana, there we are. There's New York, right? Very high inequality, but you could attribute that to very high income in those pockets as well. But you've got, and there's Georgia, Florida, so you've got, your South right there. So we've made our inequality. We know why that is because of slavery and segregation, but here are the effects of it in terms of trust. New Hampshire, Minnesota, North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Vermont, Iowa, Utah, Wisconsin. Okay, here's another piece. This is a variety of countries. This is from much more recent data. Countries plotted by, I know it's a blur of countries, but these are self-expression values. So as you go out here, you value more self-expression. You really value more individualism. Expressing yourself. So that's Sweden, the Netherlands, Denmark, Canada, Norway, USA, Australia, Switzerland, Austria, Ireland, Britain. Down here, more survivalist, tending to yourself, tending to your kin, tending to your family, not expressing yourself, but conforming to norms that will keep you alive and tended to. Romania, Belarus, Moldova, Russia, Azerbaijan, Albania, Estonia, Lithuania, Turkey, Peru, Brazil up there, Venezuela is up there, that's about, Uruguay is up there. So, and some of these, it's been noted, has changed to some degree. I believe, yeah, I'm trying to remember which ones. There's an animation of it. It may be Uruguay, which shifted up a lot recently. So some of this can happen with one leader making a change or one circumstance triggering a change in values. But this is how much freedom you have in your government. How much democracy is there? So how much do you feel like you're empowered by your social institutions individually? How much are your institutions empowering you and enabling you to tend to yourself? If they're not, you're going to be down here. If they are, you're free to value self-expression. This is looking at this is mapping the countries. This is Ron Engelhardt. I can't help but show you this data because it's relatively new and it's so large. It's the largest population ever sampled. Hofstede looked at 53 countries, but Engelhardt looked at many more because of the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Union. But he notes that there's a real relationship here between self-expression values, you value more individualism, and secular rational values as you go up with institutions that support a rational pursuit of self. And so as you move up in terms of the strength of those institutions, you move over in terms of self-expression, accepting the communist bloc, which of course was anti-individualism in certain ways. So that was sort of the legacy of that. So theorizing the patterns in terms of what's happening here, to sort of wrap things up for us. Individualistic institutions. So this is like public education and open market and capitalism, but not too open so that you don't feel like you have any access to it. In other words, corporate dominance is held in check. But an open market, a democracy where you have free speech, free press, those kinds of things, would lead to individualism. Because a lot of those countries have those institutions, if they're strong. So if they're seen as legitimate versus corrupt, and that's a function of wealth. If the people are paid well, they're less likely to be corrupt, for example. So my brother-in-law, when I explained like having to give $5 to the cop after being pulled over, he said, "Yeah, but you know, we don't really feel that up in arms about that kind of thing because you know how much they're paid? Very little. It's like $100 a month to live on." So you know, it's a bit of a redistribution of wealth in a sense. So individualism becomes more likely as institutions are strengthened with money. And so money is a big part of it. It facilitates individualism. And I'll give you sort of a plausible theoretical model of this, okay? A sociologist would measure all these things and then they would look at how the relationships come out. Is that a significant positive relationship or a negative relationship? So you're starting with the strength of individually oriented institutions, provided you have those institutions and not, say, communist or socialist institutions, something like that. And if they're strong, you lead to individualism. If they're not, you get more collectivism. That would lead to a greater importance on the quality and quantity of social relationships. If you're individualistic, it would lead those relationships to be less important. And as a result, you'd have, oh yeah, and by the way, sure there's other factors, whether it's a Catholic country, for example, that might prioritize relationships more than a Protestant country, something like that. Moments in history, if you have a particular leader, but overall, those factors would balance out and you'd see a general pattern weighted on less historically contingent circumstances. But that's why the social life is as it is in the US, and that's why the social life is as it is in Ecuador. Relatively poor social life in the US, as we saw in those interviews, and relatively rich social life in Ecuador. So, what it might mean for the world as the world develops, well, it could mean, and I said, I took this out, but as or if the world develops a certain way, it needn't become all democratic, but if the world develops more like us and less like ISIS or Iran or something like that, though Iran is pretty individualistic in a sense. Oh no, check that, I would back off of that. Yeah, more like us, but it does seem like Eastern Europe and so on is going our way, China as well. It would mean increasing individualism, you would think. It would mean maybe a decreasing importance of family. You know, more shows like The Simpsons, in a sense, right? And a decreasing quality of social life. Now, that means something to me, sort of personally, because I've done a lot of research and writing, not on this stuff, but on something else, on this, explaining what we're doing when we're making culture, when we're talking to each other, when we're making nicknames, when we're telling stories, when we're making up stories, when we're telling jokes. when we try and sort of hash over what happened on Super Tuesday or something like that. We're making our shared understandings. We're making a sense of the world that we agree on together. And it's fun. We like to do that. It's aesthetically pleasing to understand the world with somebody else, because that you're okay, if you think that too, then I'm on fair ground. I'm probably right about what's going on. And that makes me feel better. It's like a nice picture that's put in order. So I'm arguing that we enjoy interacting with each other because it's pleasurable to put the world in order and make it meaningful for ourselves. But it may be that we less and less feel like we need to do that because our institutions are taking care of things for us and we can be on our own more. So that's a possibility, I think, for the future, that we become less and less social with the rise of formal institutions. Okay, well, I hope we've got a little time for questions, but thank you all for your attention. I really, really appreciate it. Any questions at all? Yeah.
Loren, I was wondering if you noticed any pattern in the Americans that you interviewed in Ecuador, because it struck me that I know a lot of Southerners that might have felt very, very comfortable in Ecuador, whereas someone from Massachusetts might not have been as comfortable.
That's right. I'm a Yankee, man. That's right.
And again, my point is, isn't the South a lot like...
Yeah. Jeff, if you weren't here, this is Jeff Hendricks in the back. Y'all know Professor Hendricks. If he wasn't here, I might have given your story. I thought about giving your story. I don't know if you remember it, but when I first came to Centenary 20 years ago, I was socializing with a bunch of faculty. I don't know, at some point Jeff said, yeah, I adapted. It made sense to me, coming back from Illinois as a grad student and so on, when somebody said, well, you just have to realize Louisiana's like the developing world. It's like a third world country. And that made sense to me too, and I sort of understood it. But yes, this is my point on the county's point, and the state's point. Yes, that is definitely true. One of the sweet, special things about living in the South is that we don't have very strong institutions, and we never have, right? They've been precariously positioned on unequal race relations and so on, and we don't have any large metropolises other than Atlanta, right? Maybe that's why SEC football is so important or something like that. But yeah, I think there's something to that Southern culture and Midwestern culture are more social because the institutions are weaker and less important. So family becomes more important than social relationships do. Yeah.
And poverty has something to do with that.
And poverty has something to do with that, that's right. Carol Stack is a black woman sociologist who's done ethnographies on what it's like to be a poor black woman with kids and so on. And she documents so well what a rich social network these women usually have. And they depend on each other very much. It's a very social network. Much more so, much more collectivistic than you're on your own sort of upper middle class, often white world. Yeah, Michael?
How about social media networking? Where does that fit into this?
Yes. And so y'all, in here, you younger people who, know what yik yak is and stuff like that. You'll feel it, right? So you'll say when somebody of an older generation like my age, gets on you for doing too much of that on your phone, you can sort of feel like, well, this is just socializing. This is sort of healthy stuff. I'm not just sitting there like you are, watching a sitcom. I'm actually producing stuff. I'm helping create that order. What does the world mean as I'm texting? You're just taking in order. What does the world mean as you sit and watch TV? So I think it's an advance, Michael. I mean, social media, I think, is sort of our outlet, because we're feeling this. It used to be noted in the United States, oh, we got a great life in terms of standard of living, but a lot of people complain about social life. They say, no, my social life is not that great at all. A good friend of mine in Shreveport once said to me, and this guy, he's a really charismatic social guy. Really. I mean, you look at him, you think, oh, he must have a lot of friends. He once said to me, oh, my social life sucks, man. I don't get together with anybody. Yeah.
But do you think that is going to affect a lot, the social media is going to affect a lot places like Ecuador? They are going to lose the whole thing about having to connect with one-on-one. Don't you think that that change is a lot, what it's going to be?
Well, I think one thing, actually, you may remember Alex Liu, who was an Asian American centenary student, Kappa Alpha here at Centenary, who went on to sociology, but he did for his honors project cell phone use, and this is like 10 years ago probably, maybe 8, but cell phone use and what it does, texting, what it does for your social life. And at this point, there were students who didn't really text that much, and students that did, so he could sort of compare, you could get the range. He found that those students who texted more, it led to more real social interaction, not less. Right? So I'll bet a lot of y'all feel that. It's like, yeah, I'd miss out on a lot of stuff if I wasn't texting. Yeah?
So do you think having social media would help like the more individualistic like countries or counties in having those interactions? So like it doesn't have to be that the United States has to have like a weaker social
life. Yeah, I do think that. I think we're going to come up and get our nutritional, we're going to rectify our nutritional deficiency in socializing with social media somewhat, because texting is not a replacement, you guys know, for being together in person, but it might help us get together in person more. Yeah, so I do think that.
But it eliminates the touch element. In all of these cultures you're talking about, touch is really important in the social interaction. You know, touching each other, kissing each other, all of those things, and putting your hand on each other, leaning on each other, putting your arms around each other.
Yeah, and I think I've already, Sebastian, didn't I touch you in class the other day? Yeah. Okay, but in a nice way. I did this to Sebastian. I did this. And I said, yeah, in Latin America, people do that. I've seen my father-in-law lean against Fredman, my wife's cousin, during a fit, lean, like that, for like, 10 minutes. And in the United States, what are you doing, and at least white upper middle class. And so, but that's a whole other host of things. I'm not sure that's institutionally related. I think that may be more something to do with, I don't know, gender roles and unpacking all that. But yeah, it's another deficiency. That's right. We're undertouched. We don't dance enough, probably. Don't cry enough. That's right.
And also the lack of a social, an economic net, not having Social Security. I just went through this past weekend in Mexico with a funeral, and nobody has insurance.
Yeah.
And so when someone dies, it's expected that members of the family everybody's got to put in their money and pay for the funeral.
And don't you think that might sort of be a good thing?
Oh, I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to throw away our retirement, but
you have to have these social networks in order for that to happen.
Right.
If you're living by yourself alone, you're going to die in your little casita,
right.
and that's it. You have to have those social networks for that.
I saw a guy leaving Super One just this afternoon who looked like he could have been 85 or 90. He was walking really slow to his car, and I was thinking, is that guy going home alone? Does he live alone? Is he gonna die alone? And I think that's much more common in our country than it is in others. Any other questions? All right, we don't want to die alone, y'all, so let's thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. other students.
Stayed on the telephone for like 5 minutes. He is tired.